The best-known truck in automotive history, driven by Andy Brass and created by the man who started the monster truck revolution, Bob Chandler. Gravedigger, the heir apparent to the Bigfoot popularity that has heretofore been unchallenged. These two will meet in the ultimate showdown on an airborne course in Minneapolis. ESPN, the world leader in motorsports coverage, presents Speed World. Barefoot, the name that spells world champion in the world of monster truck racing. But this time around, the world champ's got his work cut out for him as Fred Schaefer and Barefoot battles Bigfoot and Gravedigger at the Metrodome in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hi, everybody. I'm Brett Kepner. Get ready for what may well be the 8-truck monster truck war of the century.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Chapman in the Spectrum. In a moment, college professor turned truck puller Wayne Rouse will take on a field of 12 of America's finest two-wheel drive truck pullers.
Welcome to the 1991 Monster Truck Challenge Series. Welcome, everybody, to the Metrodome in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the USHRA Association's Monster Truck Challenge Tour has moved to what may well be the most spectacular single course we've seen so far in 1991. The first man up on the 300-foot course, Fred Schaefer and the Barefoot Chevrolet from Granite City, Illinois. Unbelievable flight, landing right at the finish line. The elapsed time for the Barefoot Chevrolet, 3.564 seconds. That will be the mark to beat as we continue. The next machine on the starting line from Indianapolis, Indiana, Greg Adams and the immaculate Crimson Crusher Ford. And Adams takes a more conservative approach to that first ramp, idling through at 7.55 seconds for number 2. This time around, Stan Hall in the Big Boss Ford, a brand new entry onto the USHRA Association Camel Monster Truck Trail. A beautiful piece of equipment as well. Hall puts her in the air, lands nicely, and comes across a little bit sideways at the finish line, but the elapsed time, 6.76 seconds, will give him number 3. Obviously, Fred Schaefer's run in Barefoot is turning out to be an incredible effort to start things off. But coming up next, one of the home state heroes, Minneapolis' own Jim Tomes and the barely tame Ford. A rather conservative approach and taking down some finish line markers. That isn't going to help him any, but the elapsed time, 7.75 seconds, will right now place him number 4 in the field. But here is the winningest driver in the 1991 USHRA Association National Championship Tour so far this year. From Woodstock, Illinois, it's Rob Fuchs and the First Blood Ford. Fuchs leaves the line nicely. An incredible airborne leap, almost a nosedive at the finish line, but the elapsed time, 3.89 seconds. It'll put him number 2 in the program by about 33 hundredths behind the leader. That'll bring up the Chevrolet from Minnesota of Doug Spanier, the master of disaster. Spanier leaves the line, puts it in the air, bounces radically, and he, too, takes out the finish line poles. The elapsed time, 6.99 seconds for the master of disaster. It'll qualify in the top half of the field at this point. But here's the killer, Andy Brass in the highest tech machine in the sport, Bob Chandler's Bigfoot number 9. An incredible launch, unbelievable! Coming back to earth, literally past the finish line. The elapsed time to beat was 3.56 seconds. Brass runs 2.60 seconds. But the next machine to the starting line, the 1950 Chevrolet Gravedigger and Dennis Anderson. A loud launch, a huge hit on the cars. Anderson lands it straight as an arrow. The elapsed time, 3.43 seconds. That will place the Gravedigger number 2 behind Bigfoot, with world champ Fred Schaefer and the Barefoot Chevrolet number 3 and the First Blood Ford of Rob Fuchs number 4. Stay with us. We're back at the Metrodome in Minneapolis, Minnesota with the USHRA Association Camel Monster Truck Challenge Series, and this course has proven to be a photographer's dream. How about 10,000-pound monster trucks, 15 feet in the air at 60 miles per hour? An incredible sight, but now we go into side-by-side eliminations, and here's the number 1 qualifier. Andy Brass at the wheel of the Bigfoot Ford will take on number 5, a surprising Stan Hall in the Big Boss Ford. And Brass just drives away. Not even close. An incredible run for the Bigfoot Ford, advancing to the semifinal round. This time around, it's the number 3 qualifier, the defending world champion in the near lane, Fred Schaefer and the Barefoot Chevrolet, taking on the incredible Crimson Crusher from Indianapolis, the Ford of Greg Adams. Remember, Schaefer led qualifying until the last 2 runs of the qualifying round. He ended up number 3 in the field. They leave the line, and Schaefer drives away in the Barefoot Chevrolet. An unusual situation in that Fred Schaefer usually receives some pretty stiff competition from Greg Adams. The Crusher Ford well behind the Barefoot Chevrolet, though, in this particular run, as the next pair is already getting ready to stage up. It'll be the barely tame entry of Jim Tomes, the Ford in the far lane, taking on the number 4 qualifier, Rob Fuchs and the First Blood Ford, always a killer. They leave the line, and problems immediately for the First Blood Ford. Jim Tomes, the Minnesota Ford campaigner, will advance to the semifinals in an upset. The dead last qualifier gets past the number 4 driver. And it appears that right now Rob Fuchs has an idol in the First Blood Ford, and that's it. It sounded as he left the starting line like it was merely the throttle linkage that broke off the starting line, but let's face it, with no control over the throttle, you're not going to make it down the track. It'll be Dennis Anderson's incredible Gravedigger 50 Chevrolet from North Carolina, taking on the Chevrolet from Minnesota of Doug Spanier, the master of disaster, teammate of Jim Tomes, barely tame Ford we saw earlier. A huge hit on the cars. Anderson will advance to the semifinals. The semifinal round will pit the barely tame Ford against the Gravedigger of Dennis Anderson. But more importantly, the ultimate rivalry coming up next. Bigfoot versus Barefoot, and championship truck pulling action from Philadelphia. Stay with us.